The next principle I want to talk about is transparency. And that's what Mouse in the Room is about. This book, if you're watching the video, you can see the cover here. And we called it Mouse in the Room because the elephant is not alone. You know about the elephant. I know about the elephant. No one's saying anything. That's an elephant in the room. But the mouse in the room is any feeling you're having, any thought you're having, or any body sensation that has not been named. That's a mouse, and it could be quite subtle. And I'll give and when we start artfully naming these mice, and I say artfully because if you do it the wrong way, you can cause trouble. The other person gets to know the real you in this moment. Not this is what I loved when I was a kid, or I love ice cream. No, in this moment, this is what's happening for me right now. That's unusual. Most of us don't relate in present moment awareness. So naming mice is a way to do that. Hey, I notice as I'm with you, this is what I'm feeling. I'm feeling some excitement. I notice as I hear your story, I feel some sadness and some concern. So we start to be relational. And an example that came to mind is when I was once sitting with Jack Canfield at a luncheon. And even that took something. Like, how do you sit next to Jack when there are 150 people wanting to sit next to Jack?
Sure.
Well, this was accidental, but it's a great tip if you ever want to use it, listeners. I was chatting with him and they called us to lunch and I had to go to the bathroom. And I wanted to follow up with Jack and sit next to him. And I just said, as I went, look, I got to go to the bathroom. Would you save me a seat? Come on. So then when I got back, he'd had to turn 10 people away from the seat next to him because he was saving it for me. So now I'm sitting with Jack and we're talking, and I screwed up some courage. And I said, look, I wonder if you would consider writing the foreword to my book. But here's where the transparent part came in. I felt a little off about it because I'd also was pitching Richard Branson. And if Richard said yes, I was going to go with him.
Yes.
So I said, I screwed up my courage and I named a mouse. I said, Jack, and I just want to be transparent. I have asked Richard Branson, and if he says yes, I'll go with him. And I know this is a big, bold request. Would you be willing to be my backup? If he says no, and classic Jack, he said, well, I see you're going alphabetically, and that makes sense. Oh, it was amazing. But then that was out in the open and I didn't have to hide anything. And I believe to this day that the fact that this is how I try and show up in every relationship, particularly when I might lose something, was what has so many people say, I trust this guy. You can trust this guy. You should have him on your podcast. I've had women in my community ask a friend, if I go to a date at this house, can I trust this guy? And my community is going to say, yes, absolutely. And I think it's because I'll tell the truth, especially if I'm going to lose something. So don't just go and bleed over everybody and be like, you know, you're not going to go to the boardroom and say, we're running off a cliff. I'm freaking out. We've got no solutions and I don't know what to do. Ah! No, you're not going to do that. But you might work with your coach and then go to the boardroom and say, look, some of you might be scared in this current climate. I don't blame you. Sometimes I am too. But we are working on solutions and together we will find our way. Like there are ways to do it.
Yeah. And David, I think, you know, it's been interesting for me to see, I mean, if you look back in, you know, in business, certainly in corporate traditionally, it was the exact opposite, right? You know, you didn't bring your whole self to work. You certainly didn't show your emotions. You didn't show weakness, like all these things that, you know, I think used to be part of corporate culture and still unfortunately are in some places. But I think the move towards transparency and authenticity, the ability, you know, and I think it's actually one of the advantages of social media, even though there are so many negatives, like people sniff out, like, and you know, and younger generations just don't tolerate inauthenticity anymore, whether it's in advertising, whether it's in, you know, management systems and whatever. And I think that's, you know, that's a good thing. And I, you know, my guess is when you coach people around this, that there is some folks that, that might seem exciting to, but there are many who probably, have a lot of resistance around this one. It's a tough one because we've been so conditioned, at
We
least
have.
traditionally opposite.
We, yeah. And I grew up as an Australian male in a country town. So I didn't learn transparency. I didn't know it was a thing you could do. It wasn't until I got to Landmark and I saw this leader on stage. And on the third day, he said, I'm terrified of people. And I'm terrified of speaking to groups.
And he's in front of 100, like whatever people.
He's doing
right?
he's doing it for a living.
Right.
And part of me was admiring, like, wow, look what you're doing for a living of service. So I really felt closer to him. Another part of me was saying, you can say that? I didn't know you could say that. I had a friend come up to me once and say, oh my God, I've just realized something. I'm needy. But he wasn't saying it like it was a problem. He said, I'm needy. Right now, I'm needy. And that's okay. I didn't know you could say that. So it started a life journey for me of how much can you say? And you'd be surprised. Read the book, listeners, mouseintheroom.com. You'd be surprised how you can artfully say things. I've said things that could have sent me to prison. Literally, I've broken the law in the past. When I was a minor, I committed a crime. And then later in life, I was horrified. And I tracked down the person and confessed and said, look, I just want you to know that was me. And I'm really sorry. And how can I make it right? Could have gone to prison. But that conversation changed my life because I realized, the person said, look, it really wasn't any big deal. We're fine. We're good. Oh my God. So transparency is a doorway, yes, to making deals, but it's a doorway to a confident, fulfilling and influential life. I want to give another example of transparency. And this is from Alex Mandosian, who's a genius marketer. And I know this podcast isn't specifically about making sales, and sales are a deal. I went to speak to 1,200 people, and then at the end, you get to make a pitch. All right. So I wanted to make a deal with 1,200 people. And what Alex said is don't hide what you want. Tell them up front. And this is an example of naming a mouse. So I said up front, I want to do everything in my power to motivate, persuade, and influence you to continue your training with me. I think I can really help you. And so the best way I can think of to do that is to give you the best content I can in 60 minutes and show you what's possible. And then you'll decide if you want to work with me. Does that sound fair? And they all went, yeah. Now I had permission to sell to them and to pitch. Now this works in dating. You could say to someone, I'm realizing I'd really like to date you. I'd really like to take you out and ask you out. Would that be okay? You're being transparent about what it is you want. You could call someone. I got this from Steve Sims, who's brilliant at the art of, getting someone to say yes to something. He said it'll often lead with, up front, I want to tell you I have an ask. Right? Being transparent. I have an ask. But first, and then he gets into what he thinks he might be able to offer. Because if you don't say that, people know you're probably going to come up with something. You're probably looking for something. Let's put it on the table. I would like to make a deal with you. That's my goal. At the end of this, that we can create a deal that's a win for both of us. Is that okay? Is that on the table? Can we talk about that?